Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the We Out Here Expat Podcast. Today, we got a very, very interesting topic, and I'm going to be talking about it with my good friend J.K. Hobson. J.K., how you feeling?
I'm good, man. I'm up here in space. Jeff Bezos, of all people, was just up here in a giant penis. I know it sounds unbelievable. I am flabbergasted myself, but I'm just telling you, this is what I saw. How are you?
He definitely did a very good Dr. Evil impression.
What I'm trying to figure out is there's no way, with all the people that he knows, there had to be at least one person like, you know that looks like a dildo, right? There's no way there wouldn't be one person. So which makes me think he did that on purpose. He purposely flew a giant dildo into outer space. Would you agree?
Well, I mean, I was reading an article about that, and it talked about the scientific reasonings why the rocket was shaped that way and how engineering wise it makes sense. So I guess men all have rockets. And that's the but we all have all small versions of rockets. That's what I got from that.
Speak for yourself, sir. Speak for yourself.
All right, so switching off from that topic, switching back on to weed in sports. Sha'Carri Richardson, one of the fastest athletes on the planet, posted a record time during a tryout a few weeks ago, tryout for the Olympics. And right after her performance, everyone was crowning her the new FloJo, the modern incarnation of FloJo. There were big things waiting ahead for this woman. And then all of a sudden, she had a lapse of judgment. She was caught smoking that devil's grass. She tested positive for marijuana. And now,
why do you sound like Clayton Bigsby all of a sudden?
Listen, man, I'm trying to do a bit.
The black white I'm sorry.
I'm setting it up.
Continue.
But she threw it all away, all to just selfishly smoke some devil's grass, man. Threw away the opportunity to represent her great nation in the Olympics. JK, how do you feel about this demonic person, this criminal?
I feel it's like a bit of a loaded question. I feel bad for her, man. I feel that's I feel like the United States is cutting its nose off to spite its face. I feel empathy for her. I know her mom had just passed away a few days before, although I can't imagine that she just didn't smoke weed before that. And then she just started smoking weed because her mom passed away. But that said, I think it's hypocritical that if she just spent the next 5 days after her mom had passed, like drinking herself into a stupor and waking up in a pool of vomit, people would have been like, yeah, okay, that's understandable. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's, she was going through it, but because it was weed for some reason, so yeah, I'm very confused about the argument, which is, I guess that's what this podcast is about. Is the argument she was doing something? Was it a performance enhancing drug? Or was she just breaking the law? But most of all, yeah, I feel empathy for her, man. You know what I mean? It's like, we all make mistakes in our youth. I make mistakes to this day. Doing this podcast might be a mistake. I don't know. We don't know until it all pans out.
JK, it sounds like you're making excuses. You're making excuses for a person who had the opportunity of a lifetime and she willingly threw it away for a few moments of fleeting happiness, man. It sounds like you're just this all talk of, I don't even know what empathy means. What is empathy? Right? How can you have empathy for a criminal, right?
It also sounds like you're auditioning to be the next black pundit for Fox News. Listen, let me tell you,
Am I
if you
doing
want to
well?
be a black news pundit for Fox News, if you want to be the new conservative guy, you got to get rid of all that fucking facial hair, dude. You know what I mean? You can't have facial hair and that goes for everybody except for Candace Owens. Candace Owens gets to keep hers. But sir, as someone who identifies as male, you're going to have to cut it off, man. You're going to have to choose your, yeah.
I'm going to be the first conservative on Fox News with a full beard and earrings. I'm changing the game. All right, let's play it around.
Matters,
You brought up an interesting point, right? So she was suspended because marijuana is considered, or cannabis is considered, a performance-enhancing drug. I'm not clear in terms of what performances marijuana or cannabis, whatever your phrase is. I don't know what performances it enhances exactly, but apparently it enhances something. So she was suspended. Now there's a lot of talk about accountability, and we'll touch on all that and touch a little bit more on her story in more detail. But marijuana itself has been a controversial, and I would even say culture dividing topic for a lot of people. It seems now things are shifting. People are starting to understand that one, marijuana is not as dangerous as we have been led to believe over the past century, but more so than that, there seems to be a more favorable opinion towards legalizing it, or at least decriminalizing it. But I want to touch on the history of that and how we even got to this point. Why is marijuana considered a gateway drug? Why have all these myths and lies about it believed by so many people? So join us on this little journey as we talk about weed and why it's illegal. And let's go ahead and look no further than the short answer. Why is weed even illegal? Why was it illegal? It seems to be a very harmless plant. Well, not harmless, but harmless compared to other substances that JK likes to partake in. So
really personal all of a sudden. I thought we were gonna leave my alcohol abuse out of this. Like I couldn't do this show without 4 shots of whiskey before I start. So count your blessings, sir.
Hey man, listen. I need you here, no matter how I get you here. If it's drunk, so be it. All right. Don't tell anyone what's in that cup. All right. So
I'm only caffeinated. I just did the caffeine for this. The gateway drug thing is funny, man. The gateway drug thing is funny.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
alcohol is the gateway drug. That's all I got to say. In the short note.
That's a topic we're definitely going to get into that one, but this is something I want to talk about. So why is it illegal? JK, before I go into this, why do you think weed is illegal?
Why do I think weed is illegal?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's illegal for a lot of reasons. Part of that is that it's less controllable than, because it's not processed. It's a little bit difficult. It's a little bit more difficult to control the growth of it, the manufacture of it. So in other words, it's easier for people to grow and make money or to produce than other things and other drugs. I think there's an element to it. There's a way that weed makes you kind of process information and change your perception of what we know as being reality that a lot of people find dangerous. You don't find a lot of conservatives who smoke weed. You do find people that have been conservative and smoked weed, and all of a sudden, you know, it has a way of, you know, and I think that's one of the reasons it was used spiritually, which we're gonna talk about now.
Mhm.
You know, and a lot of it has to do with the way that weed use has been demonized, because it's been, you know, it's associated with black people and jazz music. You know how terrible that is, right? You know, one of America's only original art forms. You're welcome.
The original art
You
form,
know,
right? Well, blues
I
and
mean,
blues first, and then jazz, I believe. But yes.
and whereas I think blues has a little bit more of a direct connection to African music. You know, they took the drums away, but they couldn't take the melodies away, right? And the harmonies. But jazz, when you listen to jazz music, you know, at its most like original, like bebop, you know, it's really difficult to pinpoint its connection, you know, to blues music, although that it's there. So it's like it stands out as its own thing, you know, and that was really associated with weed smoking. So again, but a lot of it has to do with xenophobia, you know, and the ways in which the ways that it can really change your mind, so to speak. I feel like I'm talking too.
No, you're giving the people exactly what they need to hear, because we're actually going to touch on a lot of what you just talked about. So this is some few clips from Britannica talking about the reason why weed is illegal, and of course, short answer is racism, and long answer, anti-Mexican sentiment after the Mexican Revolution, which led to Mexican immigrants immigrating to the United States in the early 20th century. And with them, they brought a particular plant. Now, this plant, of course, it was grown in the US, it was used throughout the US, but the association with marijuana with Mexican immigrants created a huge campaign, fear campaign, xenophobia campaign, which made it easier for lawmakers to not only denigrate the immigrants, but also denigrate the drug itself, right, or the substance, I should say. I'm gonna call it a plant or a herb. Those are my key words for marijuana today: plant or herb. That's the way I will describe it.
Yeah.
My good friend Harry J. Now, I called him Ass Slinger when I was trying to say his name.
I say ass liquor. I say ass liquor.
Well,
but you know,
for accuracy's sake, I believe it's pronounced Anslinger.
He's not here.
Ass Linger, whatever you want to call him. He was the former head of the Bureau of Narcotics, and he created an all-out war against cannabis, primarily because of his disdain for immigrants, but also he wasn't too fond of the way marijuana or cannabis tends to have people, you know, question things and interact with people that he doesn't believe they should be interacting with. I found this quite interesting. This quote here: "Reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men." Guys, this was the former head of the Bureau of Narcotics. It's important to remember that whole CRT conversation we had a few videos ago, and how that is.
Go into click on the other link in the channel as we're referring to that.
Yes,
please refer.
It's very important. You guys go back and look at that if you want to see the connection. But furthermore, it just seems to be that this drug just had people interacting with different races of people in ways that the powers that be at that time did not appreciate. I really like this one. He believed that smoking pot would result in their having sex with black men.
Wow.
That's a condemnation if I ever seen one.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. There's so much to unpack, man.
JK,
this,
has weed made you want to have sex with black men?
well, maybe I haven't smoked that strain yet, but no, I can't say it's gone there. I will say that when you smoke weed with people, it's probably a little bit easier to experience their humanity, whoever they are. You know what I mean? If you're, I mean, if that is your, if that is your preference, if you're a woman and you smoke weed with somebody, I don't know. I'm just saying that I think that weed has a way of kind of removing barriers from between people. You know, it can. It can.
Yeah,
This whole,
100%
yeah,
agree.
this whole thing with reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. You know, I wonder, like, how do you? That's a very personal. That's not a legal distinction. You know what I'm saying? That's a very personal assessment. You know, I'd be curious to see what kind of research went into coming out with an assessment like that. You know, you imagine some FBI guy going undercover and smoking weed with jazz musicians and they're chopping it up. And he's like, wow. And then all of a sudden, like overwhelmed with, you know, again, like just seeing who they are and their ability and intelligence and creativity. And never mind, they jump on stage and rip some crazy ass jazz music that this person could not even think about doing themselves, you know, maybe cracking jokes going over his head, you know. And so all of these darkies think that you might think they're as good as you, or you might think they're better than you. And that it could be instrumental in usurping like your entire, you know, this whole idea that you're fighting behind, you know, in the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, the United States, white supremacy. It could dismantle all of that. So it's a threat.
Oh, hold on. Wait. JK, are you suggesting that the FBI and other government agencies could have been headed by people who had racist beliefs and ideologies, and that racism thus influenced the policies they chose to create and enforce? Are you saying that? Because that's outlandish.
Yes.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first.
Newsflash. Newsflash. I mean, look at the time we're talking about. They're talking about Mexican people, Mexican immigrants. How long after the Mexican-American War was this? You got places still called California and Los Angeles and Arizona and Colorado and Texas. And then, like, how many days later do you go, look at these immigrants trying to come into our country? Like, you just stole it. You just stole it a decade or two before. And now all of a sudden you get to dictate what these people should be, whether they should be coming back in or what they should be bringing in. These people got some balls, man. They got some balls. I give them that.
Or they had some balls.
They had some.
I think they're long gone now. So there was a movie that came out that helped spur people's fear of cannabis called Reefer Madness. I have never seen this movie. I've tried to find some clips of it. Definitely go check it out and post in the comments your thoughts about the film. But this was a time in which, you know, Hollywood movies were used primarily as propaganda. Probably 2 decades before this. No, I think it was about 2 decades before this, or a decade before this. You had the film Birth of a Nation that came out, which, you know, spurred the KKK or the revival of the KKK. So it makes sense that, you know, if you only have a limited amount of films and everyone's going to go see those films, then it's very easy to spread propaganda, which led to the creation of the Marijuana Tax Act, which, interesting fact, the reason why it was called the Tax Act is because outright banning of substances was considered an overreach by the federal government. But the power of the IRS was such that the government, different government agencies used the IRS to enforce certain laws that they wanted to enforce. Marijuana being one. So while necessarily having marijuana might not be the thing to get you in trouble, the fact that you have marijuana without a tax receipt proving that you paid for it legally, which you can't pay for it legally, means that you will have a greater chance of being sent to jail under that tax act, right? So that using the power of the IRS to target people who were selling or distributing marijuana, which I think was a very interesting approach. It's a lot different than the stop and frisk approach New York, the NYPD is using currently.
Yeah, I think the NYPD might have just stopped using that. That was like popular in the like maybe early aughts.
Are you sure? That's something I have to do some more research on that, because I was just reading an article in NPR a few weeks ago where it was talking about how stop and frisk is still a problem in New York.
Is that right? Okay, I haven't been there in a while.
Yeah, you've been living abroad for quite some time, JK. You gotta.
Yeah. But I thought it was one of Bloomberg's things, and then they, and it was obviously terrible. And I lived in New York during when Guglielmi was mayor, and was definitely a victim of his broken windows method of policing.
Yep. So the Marijuana Tax Act was used to prosecute people who had marijuana illegally, of course, because the sale of marijuana was illegal. And so therefore, even back in the early 20th century, you had a massive campaign, a fear campaign against cannabis, and you had the prosecution of people of color for its use, right? So this has been a tale as old as the inception of the drug to the country itself. All right, what are your thoughts on this?
It's so crazy. It's kind of like, here you go. Somebody in the room has purple shoes. We're gonna make having purple shoes. This is something that you do that we cannot really justifiably connect really to any criminal action. So we'll make the thing that you do, but we'll make the thing that you do illegal so that we can punish you for this criminal action. Which is basically, it's like saying they can't really connect it to a criminal act. So if they make it the criminal act, therefore by doing it, you are committing a criminal act. Like, hey, I don't break the law. I just smoke weed. Well, guess what? Smoking weed is against the law. You're in trouble now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it goes into the point earlier that we had when we were first talking about this topic about rules being in place, and you have to know the rules and follow the rules, and if you break them, be held accountable. It's like, well, where's the accountability for rules that don't make sense, right? Or rules that are put in place for dubious reasons. Marijuana was classified as a Schedule I drug, along with heroin. Now, last I checked, marijuana hasn't led to the direct deaths of people. It hasn't. No one has died due to an overdose of marijuana. Now, Jake, I could be wrong. You let me know if I am, but I don't recall. We tried to find this number. I don't recall.
There's never been a documented case of someone dying of an overdose. I know of many cases of people smoking too much weed and thought they were going to die, and then woke up the next morning like, wow, that was terrible. You know what I mean? And just went about their day. That's happened to somebody I know. But there's never actually been a documented case. I know of my Steve Hager story. Shall I tell my senior editor of High Times magazine story now?
Give it to the people.
Okay, so when I was in university a long time ago, way before it was popular to talk about marijuana legalization or decriminalization. The senior editor of High Times magazine, which was a magazine, it was about weed culture and weed cultivation, like a print magazine. He came to our school to speak about marijuana legalization. He dropped all kinds of knowledge that I didn't know about, like the sails from the Mayflower that brought the Pilgrims to the United States from Europe was made from hemp cloth. They were made from hemp cloth. The Constitution, the paper the Constitution was written on, was made from hemp paper. And you know how strong that must be, because hundreds of years later, we can still go see it in the Library of Congress. The first American flag was made from hemp cloth, right? So he talked about all this stuff. And then at a certain point, there was a question and answer session. And this woman asked a two-part question. She asks if, first, does marijuana smoking cause lung cancer the way that cigarette smoking does? And second, does marijuana cause short-term memory loss? So he goes, in regards to the first question, there's never been a documented case of someone dying of lung cancer just from smoking marijuana cigarettes. If they did die of lung cancer, they also smoked cigarettes. It was most likely the cigarettes that killed them and not the marijuana. And what was the other question? None of the potheads are laughing. They're all rewinding. The potheads are like, oh shit, what was the rewind? Aha.
And the ones in the the potheads that are watching, the other potheads that are watching are like, ah! They just hit him.
Yeah.
Gotta give it a little bit more time. All right, so according to history.com, no death from overdose of marijuana has been reported, according to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. Oh, whew. Well, trying to really figure out why it's illegal here. I think we have already discovered the reason. Also interesting is that marijuana was used for medicinal purposes in different places around the world. Sir William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, did I pronounce that? Shaughnessy.
Sounds like shock. Sounds like shock. Shaughnessy.
Shaughnessy, an Irish doctor studying in India, documented that cannabis extracts could ease cholera. Cholera. Yeah. As you can tell, I don't just wear the plant on my hat for no reason. Symptoms like stomach pain and vomiting. I used to
be on the Oregon Trail. That's how I know the name of all these old diseases that people know.
I'm like,
live Oregon Trail.
Like, I haven't seen this one in a long time. But so yeah, so we have talked a lot about the reasonings as to why it's illegal. Also in the previous slide here, it talks about the fact that, of course, the enforcement of the current drug laws has African Americans being punished 4 times more likely than their white counterparts. Even though you have Black people and Caucasians who use the drug at very similar rates, I would say same rate, right? Most of my friends who are white, they smoke weed or they have smoked weed at some point in time. Actually, to be honest with you, most of the people I have smoked weed before in the past have been white.
Right.
They tend to have, you guys, they know how to smoke weed, man. They have all the different types of contraptions. And
I don't know Black people that have like huge ass bongs and, you know, and liquefiers and vaporizers and all. That's all white shit, man.
I'm like, dude, you guys are still doing joints. It's time to move on up.
but I think the way that Black weed smokers and white weed smokers are characterized in the U.S. is different, right? Like a white weed smoker is like Brad Pitt in the movie True Romance, like sitting on the couch chilling, or you're a hippie, you know what I mean, or some
Mhm.
peacenik or whatever. You know, black weed smokers, it's like Snoop Dogg and NWA and the entire Chronic. You know, this is the way that black weed smokers are criminalized. You know, the image of black weed smokers is criminalized, and which makes it easier to say, oh, when you see somebody black smoking weed or engaging in, you know, weed sale, oh, this person's a drug dealer. Whereas the white kid, it's like, oh, he's just a kid letting off some steam, taking the edge off. You know what I'm saying? And this is a way that they use weed to, you know, unequally use the law to incriminate black folks, especially black men.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading about a case last year in Alabama where a black veteran was facing 5 years in prison for using cannabis for medicinal purposes. And to me, if you still have people going to jail in the U.S. for cannabis, I don't understand it. To me, it just seems at this point in time, understanding that the drug is not harmful. Here's another tidbit from the CDC. We were talking earlier about marijuana being a gateway drug that leads to more harmful substances. The CDC says, well, we don't really have the facts to back that up. The majority of people who use marijuana do not go on to use other harder substances. All right. But what we don't talk about when we talk about gateway substances, we don't talk about alcohol. Right.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
also don't
Most
talk
people,
about the damage that alcohol does to people. Like me
yeah, it's
personally,
true. And
go ahead.
no, it damages me a lot. I'll speak on a personal level. Like I get fucked up now. Just to touch on a couple of things you said, um, you know, one of the reasons it's criminalized in this day and age is because of the existence of the prison industrial complex. You got, you know, now private prisons, right? That don't, people are not making their money back. And I shouldn't say that in quotes. That's just the reality of it. It's just so horrifying to be able to have to say it that way. But, you know, they have these for-profit prisons that if they're not full, they don't make the money that they're supposed to, right? Because it's a profit endeavor, right? So they need them full. So they need laws like this to keep people in there. And, you know, and by and large, these people end up being black folks, right? As far as the gateway drug thing, I mean, yeah, alcohol and cigarettes are both legal. And most people do those, although I would say cigarettes probably less so now because those there's a little bit more social stigma with smoking cigarettes. I would say that for certain people in their teens and in college and university, there's probably a stigma for not drinking alcohol, which is something that probably needs to be unpacked at a later time. But those people usually do those. People usually smoke or drink before they smoke marijuana. And I would also say that, you know, marijuana is a Schedule One drug, so they put it on par with like heroin and cocaine. Perhaps the gateway is walked through when somebody smokes marijuana, realize this is not that big a deal. People try to act like it was, you know, it's illegal, and they think, wow, if this is not that bad, if this is all right, I wonder how heroin is or how cocaine is. You know, I don't think most people do that, but I think that that could contribute to it being a gateway, which means that the true gateway is misinformation.
Fake news, JK. Fake news. But no, I agree with you. Alcohol. I have woken up in the hospital from alcohol poisoning. I have never woken up in the hospital from cannabis poisoning, and to be honest, like it's like just drinking, going out on, for a night of binge drinking leads to some very serious consequences the next morning. Whereas having a night of marijuana smoking or indulgence leads to interesting conversations. Um, Binge watching episodes of TV shows I wouldn't watch if I was sober, and a good night's rest. So
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm trying to really figure out uh, why is it, we understand why it's been illegal up until this point. What I don't understand is why we still have this stigma attached to it, understanding that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that says, all right, it's time to move on from this, decriminalize it at the bare minimum, legalize it would be the goal, right? But at least decriminalization. But I feel like we're still not there yet. Like, how do you feel about that? I feel like we're still a few years away from people finally realizing, like, oh, okay, maybe we need to rethink our approach to this.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because although they're happening slowly, they're happening quite quickly at the same time. I mean, not like a decade and a half ago, if you told me that the conversation was going to have developed this far, I would have thought, wow, that's crazy, because I think Colorado was the first, Colorado and Washington, California later, medical marijuana. So, I mean, it's hard to say when it'll happen. I mean, I'm surprised that the anti-marijuana lobby doesn't use things, because there is truth in the idea that, for some people who have who are predisposed to things like schizophrenia or paranoia, marijuana, the use or the abuse of marijuana can kind of tap into those things that are possibly dormant in the person already. But I don't hear that argument getting used very much. And
Well,
maybe it's yes.
It's coming up. There have been people who have mentioned that, like, the abuse of marijuana does make mental illnesses such as schizophrenia worse. Right. But at the same time, you have cases of that, but there's not enough data. Like, there's not enough studies to make a strong correlation or strong link. I would say not correlation, a strong link between the two. But there have been reports. I was reading an article about this a few days ago from NPR about the scientists saying that there is a link between the abuse of marijuana and those who have suffered mental health issues such as schizophrenia. So I on the flip side of that, I mean, I also think the consequence of that is not trying to sell cannabis as a miracle herb or miracle plant like a lot of people have been trying to do. You have people that claim that marijuana, like veganism, can solve any ailment under the sun. And I'm like, well, we should probably, not do that. It has some good benefits, but too much of a good thing usually does lead to negative consequences. So everything should be used within reason. But yeah,
I think you did touch on something. I think you did touch on something, which is that potheads are the vegans of the drug world. You know what I'm saying? Like if I did cocaine every day, you would never know it, right? But you got the hat on, you know what I'm saying? You guys are the potheads are the CrossFitters of the drug world.
I'm trying to get JK to come do a CrossFit session with me, and then we can have some. I can't believe it's not meat. Burger patties, man. Bro. It's the green revolution, man. Come on.
For real? Oh my God. No, but it would be so inappropriate. Like if you could wear that hat, right? But if somebody who did cocaine wore a hat with like a line of cocaine on a mirror with the razor blade next to it, you'd be like, God damn, this guy is wow. You know what I mean? It's so funny, which goes to show you that even amongst people who use these things and know about these things, we still draw a distinction. Like, you know what I mean? That's some other shit, you know? So anyway.
All right. So we talked about let's go ahead and touch on Sha'Carri Richardson's situation. Now, just to say this outright, I personally believe she was not going to be Shirley Ann Fraser Price. High, sober, drunk, whatever substance she wanted to use, I don't think she was going to beat Shirley Ann Fraser Price. We won't know, or at least we won't know for this Olympics. But Shirley Ann Fraser Price, posted the faster time, so I just don't see how it's possible. But I want to touch on the rules or rules thing. We were talking about this earlier, right? Just because something is a rule doesn't mean it should be, right? I think we may be on the same page here, JK.
What about if it's in the Bible? Got you there. Got you. No, I don't know.
That's a good one, man. That is
yeah. But that's a deep philosophical thing. Should you be able to break a rule if that rule is unjust? If a rule is found to be unjust, and this goes to the prison thing, should everyone who previously broke that rule be set free with no penalty? There's a whole lot to this. And before I go on, I also want to say another gateway drug, the information as a gateway, another example of misinformation being a gateway drug. If you go around telling kids that marijuana is a performance enhancing drug and it helped this woman, how many potheads are you going to make that might have been world-class track stars who are now sitting in front of their TV playing Xbox, whatever number Xbox is up to, eating pizza? You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is dangerous. You can't be telling kids marijuana is a performance enhancing drug.
Yeah, man, because I was going to be the next Michael Strahan, and then I got high.
And now look at you. I was going to be the next Afro man, and I got high.
But it's the issue with it being a performance enhancing drug for me is, and this is a point you brought up when we were talking about this topic a few days ago, is like, what exactly is it enhancing? Like, she's running track, right? Normally people use marijuana, and I guess we should stop calling it marijuana because that's the name people tried to use in the 1930s to make it seem like it's some type of demonic plant. But cannabis is used to help athletes primarily recover from injuries, but also just everyday regular Joes who out there going to the gym and they maybe overextended themselves, have a little injury. A lot of people use cannabis to help them recover. A lot of people like it more than using painkillers and opioids, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So I'm trying to figure out, and there's also studies that came out saying like there's not a strong link. There is no link between cannabis and enhancing an athlete's performance. So it just sounds like the rule is out of date and needs to change.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's a lot of like hypocrisy, like the same people who are making it illegal, or the same forces that are making it illegal, right? And who are saying that it does not have these properties, because people who are proponents say, okay, it helps with cancer patients, helps with glaucoma, helps with all kinds of pain treatment. They're talking about all these positive aspects to the consumption or use of cannabis. We just have these other people saying, no, it's not true. But then at the same time, they're saying, well, you can't use it in the Olympics because it actually helps with all these things. So it's like the same arguments against it being used legally are the arguments that they're using to keep this woman. It's very very convoluted argument.
Exactly.
Yeah. But that said, yeah, it's out of date. Like, these again, these are like, these are laws that were made at the same time as prohibition. We have to go back and look at, why were these laws created? What are the facts that we've built the writing of these laws upon?
Yeah, the purposes.
Yeah.
And even more so than that, there was a lot of talk about accountability, right? There was a lot of people who congratulated her for holding herself accountable and accepting the punishment. And I was one of those people as well that said that. At the same time, I also recognize that the rule doesn't make sense. And props to her for holding herself accountable. But I'm starting to feel like we don't really understand what this word means, because to me, we should be holding the people who write these laws accountable as well, right? If you make a law, if you make a rule that doesn't make sense, that has too many inconsistencies, or was created for dubious reasons, perhaps they need to be changed, and there needs to be a call to make sure that these laws change, right? And the people who are creating these rules and regulations need to be held accountable as well, right? When I look at what is currently going on in the U.S. Regarding the war on drugs and the damage that it has done to different communities around the country, and I don't see accountability. I don't see people who caused this damage being held accountable, right? So these calls and this fake congratulations for Sha'Carri Richardson for being accountable, when the people who are actually causing real destruction are not being held accountable. And I guess we could all, I was going to talk about accountability. What about some of these police officers? But that's a different topic. But yeah, I just, it boggles my mind.
Just saying.
I appreciate that. And then since we're talking about accountability, opioids, right? The things that some of us have used to relieve pain in the past have resulted in a lot of death and destruction, right? So recently, there's been a $26 million settlement to resolve opioids lawsuits that Johnson & Johnson and other pharmaceutical companies are involved in. But I was reading this article, there was one from the New York Times and one from the Wall Street Journal that covered this topic. And it talked about the destruction that the opioids crisis had on many communities around the country. You have over 500,000 people, which this number may be actually really low. Now this is the span of over 20 years, but still 500,000 people. I don't see anyone going to jail for these decisions. I don't like $26 million settlement is nice. $26 billion is a lot of money, it is, but it doesn't bring people back from the dead. And again, the people who made these decisions, what punishment are they receiving? How are they being held accountable? We keep talking about accountability, but the people who are actually making decisions that are harming people, they seem to escape accountability.
Yeah.
Repeatedly.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
True. It just, well, this is going to take us all the way off the rails, or a little bit. It's still related, but it just makes me think of the Citizens United Act, and the idea that these owners, these CEOs of these corporations, that Citizens United essentially gave corporations a political voice, in that corporations can send lobbyists and spend endless amounts of money influencing the people that make our decisions on our lawmakers, right? So then essentially they have as much, they are legally considered people in the way that they can exercise free speech. But at the same time, unlike people, when they commit a crime such as this, when they're found to be guilty of so much or responsible for so much death and the destruction of so many people's lives, there's nobody that's held criminally accountable. You know, which is a whole other thought, is that perhaps, you know, instead of just these corporations being able to give all this money as a settlement, maybe it would be more of a deterrent if the CEOs of these corporations were held personally responsible and had to see jail time. Maybe they would make better decisions then.
Exactly, because it's important to understand here that these companies enlisted doctors to push these opioid medications to their patients, even in cases in which the patients didn't really need it or didn't need that the certain dosage. So to me, it sounds like, yet again, in this call for accountability, we just seem to let the people who really do need to be held accountable for their actions, just seem to let them skate on by and continue to punish people who actually don't really have a grand effect on our lives in the grand scheme of things, right? And just to, if you're wondering, all right, why are you talking about opioids? I just want to have people remember, people are going to jail for weed today in the United States. People are going to jail for it. People are still in jail, right? You've had opioid uses that have increased over the years. This is the graph from the CDC. Again, according to the CDC, according to the DEA, zero overdose deaths from cannabis. Make it make sense to me. That's all I'm asking. I'm just asking for it to make a little sense for me. When are we going to start holding people accountable for the decisions that they make that actually affect people's lives, right?
Speaking of holding, it's not even just the deaths. It's like, you know, the effects go beyond. Like, how many television sets do you think have been stolen so somebody could buy some cannabis, versus how many television sets have been stolen for someone to go out and be able to you know? So it's not just the deaths, it's the crime, you know, it's the what people are driven to when they're pushed to the brink because of, and not even just their bad decisions, because they had a pain in their back or their knee and the doctor said, hey, we'll just put some heroin on it, right? You know, these are not even the decisions of these people. Like, sometimes these people are just, you know, prescribed these drugs and their lives are changed or even end as a result. So anyway, just a thought.
And lastly, I just want to round up by showing a few pictures of athletes and marijuana. You have here Gronk right here is promoting. I think he is an investor in this company. I'm not sure how involved he is in it, but he has been promoting cannabis products and CBD products for recovery purposes, for medicinal purposes. Also, Mike Tyson, he owns a huge weed farm. He's talked about how weed has changed his life. JK, now you watched an interview with Mike Tyson. What do you remember some of the things that he talked about regarding?
Yeah, I don't have them, but he did talk about how it really changed his life in the way that he's, you know, Mike Tyson was known to be an an aggressive and, you know, who suffered from mental illness for a long time, you know, and it's helped him kind of to relax and be more focused. I wish I'd remembered to bring the exact quote up, and I don't want to misquote Mike Tyson, but he's a strong proponent of cannabis use. And yeah, supposedly his cannabis resort is 420 square meters. or square miles or something like that. Acres, that's what it is. That's what it is. 420 square acres. I wish you had a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger smoking weed on here, because he did.
I forgot to bring that one.
Yeah.
I gotta add, and interesting enough, Nevada recently said that marijuana is not a performance-enhancing drug, and they allow MMA fighters to use it as well. So you have some rule changes across different sports leagues. The NBA and NFL and MLB, I believe, have changed their regulations regarding cannabis.
And Nevada had some of the strongest rules against weed, against cannabis, than any state. Because Nevada, a lot of their income, is from alcohol use, from gambling, obviously, but marijuana smoking and gambling doesn't match.
Doesn't compute.
You take a pull of that joint, they're like, they want me to put how much money on there? For what?
Yeah.
Room.
Weed makes you think about things a little bit more carefully. You're like, like when you're drunk, you're like, oh man.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
You're a little bit more cautious. You're like,
you're high, you be like, cut into my weed intake. Let me get them chips back, dealer.
You're like, Snoop Dogg did just come out with a new flavor.
Yeah, but now that the UFC brought it in, of course, Vegas is gonna change it up. Very interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to touch on really quickly Michael Phelps. He was caught a few years ago with a bong, and he was criticized for it. I think he lost the sponsorship here or there. There was some flack. He did suffer from this picture being released. At the same time, I don't look at this as a comparison between Michael Phelps and Sha'Carri Richardson. I look at this to say he shouldn't have gotten flack, and neither should she. Case closed. Like, neither one of them should have received any type of flack for using cannabis whatsoever. It just does not make any sense. Here's a picture of Kevin Durant. It doesn't make any sense. And to me, I'm at this point now where don't talk to me about accountability if we're not going to actually hold people who actually cause damage in society accountable, right? You have an entire prison system built around the war on drugs, a for-profit prison system that profits off of putting people in jail, not reforming them so that way they become better citizens when they enter society again, not treating them in a humane way, or not even punishing people who deserve to be punished, because you have a large number of people in jail in cases where they were probably better off in a drug treatment facility.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let you get the last word on this. We got to get out of here soon, but I'm going to let you have the last word, JK. What should the folks remember?
Say what?
What should the folks remember? What should they take to heart from this little convo?
What do I want the folks to remember? Well, as my teen students say, hey, smoke weed every day. No. We just got to get smarter about this, man. Just about drug use in general. Like you said, if somebody has a drug problem, why don't we just have some compassion and say, hey, maybe this person is sick. What are the underlying issues here that are driving people to do this? Instead of having people languish in prisons. The reason people languish in prisons is because there's a profit to it. You got to get rid of for-profit prisons. Stop making it so that that prison can go and lobby our politicians and just send people to jail needlessly just so somebody can fill their pockets. There's just so much that can be said. What's happening in this picture of dude in the bottom? What is in his hands? What is that? Is it a taco? Please,
I don't know. This is Ricky Williams, the famous NFL player, retired to smoke more weed. He talks to he's in this interview. It was an interview. This article is about an interview where he is talking about his wellness program, where he kind of helps people in their recovery process using cannabis as a recovery tool. I have to read the article again. It's a USA Today article, so go ahead and Google it, look it up,
What's
read it.
in his hands? What is
I
that?
I don't know. I don't know what that is. I tried to zoom it up. We're going to say it's either a big joint or a taco.
Okay, folks, if you're watching, please tell us in the comment, what do you think he's holding in his hands? We really want your feedback. Let us know what you think. Ricky Williams, what are you holding?
What do you got there? Yes, everyone. Yes, please also make sure to like, subscribe. If you like the video, make sure to share it. If you don't like the video, okay, you don't have to like it, but that's how life works. Good. We didn't make it for you.
If you don't like it, you want to send us hate mail, go ahead, leave it in the comments.
Give us comments. We get it, counts towards engagement no matter what. All right. All right, JK, I'm out of here. Everyone, peace be with you and peace out.